All right. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon again, folks. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I'm your host, Tiffany Daniels. We are going back to that horrible world known as the JRC. But before we do the usual disclaimers, if you are unfamiliar with the Stop the Shocks campaign or the campaign against the troubled teen industry, you're going to find all the pertinent links right there in the description box. Please, in particular, take note of the article written by NeuroClastic, a small non for profit started by autistics for autistics. In it, they interviewed over 900 ABA professionals in regards to the JRC's so called behavior modification program. 800, I'm sorry, autistic fog brain, folks. The Judge Rotenberg Educational Center doesn't want you to read that article so much. They threatened NeuroClastic with a defamation lawsuit. They did not remove it from the website. NeuroClastic refused. You know the drill, folks. Please read the article. Share on all your social media. Also included in there is NeuroClastic's public statement in regards to the defamation lawsuit threat, as well as a link to their GoFundMe. We are crowdfunding just in case the JRC actually does see through with their threat. All right, folks, trigger warning one. When we discuss places like the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center or Agape Boarding School for Boys, you're going to hear vivid descriptions of and catch clips of surveillance footage of people with mental health issues and disabled people being tortured and abused. If you got young children present, please make sure to use your headphones. Trigger warning 2. This channel is marked not for kids for a reason. We use profanity on occasion. We do speak on dark subjects. If your child is 16 and younger and they are watching this, very obviously, parental supervision is very much advised. Now, where we left off, shall we? Shall we? I gotta lean back. God, my back hurts. Don't get old, folks. I don't recommend it. Further, the resident summaries the JRC submitted include diagnosis but do not include any information regarding how primary diagnoses were made, such as what clinical tests or scales were used, or any other information regarding past medical history. In other words, we do not know how you came to this particular diagnosis. Now, folks, I'm going to tell you something crazy. There are a lot of folks, myself included, believe it or not, that have been improperly diagnosed. Okay? Therefore, I received the wrong treatment, which means none of my issues that were stemming from my real diagnosis were in any way being seen to. You can obviously see where the issues would come up, right? Treating autism with Ritalin, expecting it to work. Now, I won't say that it didn't help because it did, but the drawbacks, folks, I don't recommend them, all right? So, proper clinical tests and scales, what was used? Was it done properly? Does the child need to perhaps go in to get a second opinion just to make sure the diagnosis given is actually correct? In my case, folks, I've had 3 different medical teams confirm my diagnosis. All right, 3 of them. That's pretty standard. Mine went above and beyond, but I had to be reassessed as I get older and different new diagnoses come out, just as a little reinforcer, you know? The fact that the resident summaries the JRC provided does not at all give really any pertinent medical information, particularly in regards to diagnosis. Yeah, What if this kid has a completely different diagnosis entirely and they're being sent to the torture chamber? I mean, JRC. Allergies are bad today. Right? Let's continue. Dr. McCracken testified that methods of diagnosing individuals at JRC are outdated and that its staff puts very little effort into properly diagnosing individuals. Oh God, this is horrifying. You mean they diagnose these people? Hold up. Hold up a sec. So you are telling me that they bring them to the JRC, someone who definitely has a dog in the fight, to get them diagnosed. We're talking about a school that makes $250,000 a head every school year. This is not chump change. It would be within their interests to diagnose that person with said diagnosis. I'm sorry, but they're shady. And shady's just putting it incredibly lightly, okay? You should be not getting the diagnosis from the treatment program itself, okay? Diagnosis comes first, full functional behavioral assessment comes second, third comes we start talking treatment programs, okay? Do not let the place where the people are trying to shove your child into be the ones to diagnose them, okay? It's confirmation bias. And I believe every single bit that it is a very conscious one that these folks take, okay? First off, the diagnostic criteria that they use is completely outdated. And considering how outdated everything they do is, I'm thinking if we're lucky, it might be the diagnostic criteria of the 1980s. All right? They're not currently using the DSM-5 or any of the other most latest tools in regards to getting a diagnosis done. All right? This is insane because new diagnoses and new data and new information is not even being considered. What we thought what we would have said was autism could have been PDD and OS. Pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified. It's a fancy way of saying everything but the kitchen sink. But you see what I mean, right? Good. God, that's horrifying. Never, ever, hear me on this, parents, ever have your child diagnosed by the so-called treatment or education program that the school's pushing on you. If you have to, no matter what the JRC threatens, you put your foot down. And if they push, you tell them, I will call my lawyer. All right? It is critical to get your diagnosis from an actual clinic. Okay? A clinic that has no attachments to any kind of treatment programs, education programs, residential or community based. You get that separately. Okay? The incentive is too much for them to misdiagnose your kid so that they can go ahead and collect that $250,000 a head per year off you or your school district, all right? Don't do it. You get that separately from a non-biased clinic, the way everybody else does. All right? Okay, let's continue. The JRC clinicians adopted a kind of cut and paste mentality from the prior evaluations and appeared to not feel the need to more carefully assign and evaluate the presence of these overlapping terms in an effort to understand their clients more deeply. In layman's terms, the JRC refuses to update their diagnostic criteria. As a person who was a part of the large group of commenters who helped participate in creating the current diagnostic criteria, let me tell you the difference between what the JRC uses and what everybody else does is light years apart, all right? So their diagnosis off get-go is faulty. When you got a faulty diagnosis, you've got people who don't actually really truly understand what your kid's needs actually are, nor can they actually tell you if the child they diagnosed as neurodivergent is actually neurodivergent or not, because it is so hopelessly outdated. Okay? The FDA agrees that the JRC's diagnosis lack of thoroughness and careful assessment based on our review of the summaries JRC submitted in its comment. Dr. McCracken further testified, and FDA agrees, that without a proper diagnosis, it is difficult for clinicians to develop an appropriate treatment program or plan. Duh! Because they are not using the DSM-5 along with all the diagnostic tools that go along with the DSM-5, we have no way of actually knowing if the diagnosis given to the kid by the JRC is accurate or not. If you cannot be sure if the diagnosis is accurate or not, how are you supposed to determine if the treatment program you're forcing on that kid is going to work or not? You don't. You don't at all. Okay? Let me continue. As with any medical condition, improper diagnoses, treatment, and lack of access to specialty care limits positive outcomes. A proper diagnosis can greatly increase the chances of beneficial treatment. For example, when comorbid conditions are correctly diagnosed, they can be successfully treated with psychotherapies, behavioral therapies, and pharmacotherapies that are individualized to the patient's needs. Almost to the man of every single autistic I have ever met. The good majority of us have concurring diagnoses. What that looks like is I myself, I'm going to rattle it off. This is what comes from my crazy papers. Atten- excuse me. Blah. Autism spectrum disorder, anxiety disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and clinical depression. Okay? And when those all interact, and it's a bad day, folks. Woo! It's not fun, kids. It's really not fun. If you don't have someone operating off of a proper diagnostic tool like the DSM-5, you may not even catch those comorbid disorders. Or if you do, the criteria may look way different from what is currently sitting now inside the DSM-5. So a person may have a comorbid condition, a comorbid diagnosis, but you won't know about it because they're operating on such an old diagnostic system. More than likely, you're not going to catch it, right? It explains itself. All right. So that pretty much says it, doesn't it? If you're not using the most up-to-date DSM-5 as a diagnostic tool, along with the others that go along with it, how can you be sure that the diagnosis is accurate? Not just if the main diagnosis is accurate or not, how do you know if there might not be comorbid conditions, different things going on with you, or not? You don't. You have no idea. So you could be missing a lot of what you're saying in behavior if you got a kid that has PTSD on top of being autistic. Hi, how you doing? Ask me how much that fun that can be when they start bouncing off each other. Right? You could have a kid being shocked multiple times just below the lethal limit from having a reaction that may have nothing to do with the fact that they're autistic and maybe everything to do with PTSD. Maybe they're performing a behavior because they might just have anxiety disorder. And autistic programs cover a lot, but if you have an anxiety disorder on top of what you already get from your diagnosis, and it's not being properly treated because your diagnostic criteria book is from 1985, yeah, you can see how horribly wrong that could go, right? Okay, so this one's short too, but we're going to go ahead and close out, folks. We don't get very many views on this channel, and the few we do get do tend to get removed from time to time. So you know the drill. Please, folks, don't forget to hit the like button, hit subscribe, and please don't forget to hit those comments. I appreciate your time. As always, folks, we here at Spilling Tea do hope you have a good one. I'll see y'all again in a few minutes. Bye-bye, everyone.